So the next piece up on our agenda is Adam and Eve by the Northern Renaissance artist Albrecht Dürer. He created this piece in 1504, and it is a new technique on our list of techniques, and it is an engraving. So I have the definition here for you, and I think you could put the definition down by the technique part of your notes. And it's basically the practice of cutting into, if you remember that term is incising. So the practice of incising your visual onto a hard surface. Now, in our case, in engraving, you're cutting into metal and then putting the ink in the grooves of the metal and then placing the paper, whatever surface it is, usually some kind of paper, that you're going to be putting on top of that metal cut surface. The really important thing about engravings, it gives you the ability to create a number of prints, multiple prints, really as many as you have ink for. And that allows you to really distribute the art pieces in a much broader, wider way than we could have in the past when artists were just making one painting or one sculpture. So that is an essential really part of our context with the printmaking. And I will review that again in just a minute because it is that important. So in terms of context, let's just go ahead and start there. You are looking at an Adam and Eve visual narrative from the Old Testament of the Bible, and the Adam and Eve story takes place from the book of Genesis. And Dürer, if you're looking at it, going, wow, that does not look like the environment I would picture Adam and Eve, taking place in. It feels much more, I don't know, European forest-like setting, and that's because Dürer is from Germany. And in the Northern Renaissance, and with Dürer definitely falling into this category, the artists tend to set the biblical stories, like Adam and Eve here, into the Northern Renaissance settings. We saw that with Robert Campion's Annunciation, where the Annunciation was taking place inside the home of a middle class kind of merchant or slightly wealthier family. So here, Dürer is dropping Adam and Eve into a German forest setting. So right away, that's a bit interesting and unique. And I think the people of Germany and who are familiar with the North would then relate to the image. Now, the other thing about it is, the bodies will look somewhat familiar to you in terms of the way they're standing and their musculature. Dürer studied classical art in Italy, I think spending some time in Venice, used that, the observations he made, the studies of classical art, Greek and Roman sculptures, and used that in his work. So that's another important aspect that we'll expand on in content. But then again, probably the most important thing is this concept of printmaking. Printmaking and engraving is one of those types of printmaking. We'll talk about others as we go through the year. But the important impact that new technology and new technique of art, it allows the art to be widespread and reach many more people than you would do if you were painting or sculpting. Prints were easier and cheaper to produce once that initial plate, plate of metal was made. So more people could buy the art and have access to it. So Dürer is one of those artists, one of the first artists we have who has, I think, a bit more of a widespread reputation because his art is able to reach more people because of the technique he has chosen to create here with engravings. That's not to say he doesn't paint, because he does. He's a phenomenal painter, but definitely printmaking is probably more of what he's known for. The other thing we're going to get into in this art piece it's symbolically portrayed with animals here, but we're going to be talking about the four humors of the body. And it is thought of, it's this kind of more medical medieval terminology. And it's reference to the four liquids in the body: black bile, phlegm, blood, and yellow bile. And those are listed out on the left-hand list of items. These four liquids in the body ideally are balanced. And when they are balanced, you have good health, you have perfect temperament, you are functioning at your fullest capacity. When any of those liquids in the body are unbalanced, your health might fail, or your emotional stability could fail, or all of the above. So, for example, and I wrote this on the slide, if you have an excess of, let's say, black bile in your body, you could maybe feel more sad. If you have an excess of blood in your body, then perhaps you are more aggressive or angry. So the ideal is to keep those in balance. And when Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden, before they sin by eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, before that, their humors are all in balance. When they then eat and sin, their humors are thrown out of balance, and Christ has to be born then in order to then put our humors back into balance, get forgiveness for the sin, and so on. So Albrecht Dürer represents those humors in the image that we're getting ready to look at with different animals. And I wrote them on the screen on the left. So the melancholic kind of black bile is symbolized by an elk. Phlegm is symbolized by an ox. The blood with the rabbit, which you can see in the image above. And then the cat symbolizes the yellow bile. So the animals, most of the animals in here represent the four humors of the body, and I would include that in your context. So content-wise, and sorry for the big purple lines going through, but I wanted you to see some of the things clearly, and they're a little bit difficult to see. So content-wise, definitely you focusing in on Adam and Eve first. They are classically inspired bodies. Part of that is because there's contrapposto with the S curve of the body that goes back to the classical Greek era. Nudity also from Greece. So we have these nude figures, and they are muscular or ideal. Even Eve there is ripped. She's got a more, almost like a more masculine, muscular body. So that comes from Dürer studying in Italy. And again, classical influence. Their bodies are frontal, but their heads are turned inward toward one another. So they are acknowledging each other, but the bodies, again, facing frontal. And we think that Dürer was inspired by the writings of Vitruvius, the Roman writer on art and architecture. So we think he studied the Vitruvian proportions, ideal proportions, and that he is including those measurements and showcasing his knowledge and experience with the Vitruvian ideal in the bodies here. Everything then is related to each other through mathematics. So, thinking back to like a canon by Polykleitos, you could definitely relate Doryphorus by Polykleitos to something like these two bodies. Again, mentioning that the German forest is in the background, and that is not typical, and it is unique to his visual. The Garden of Eden would not be necessarily in this location. And in the center there, you have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that the serpent, almost in the center of the image, right above Eve's right hand. And there is Satan basically tempting the two with the forbidden fruit. I listed out the animals there. I pointed to the goat who's up in the upper right hand corner, and again, an example of animals found in this German forest, and some of the other animals representing, again, those four humors. And then I'm also pointing to the parrot in the upper left-hand corner. Parrot is actually on a branch that is holding up a sign with Dewar's signature and the date of the art piece. So that's kind of in a nutshell, what you're looking at. I would say also the detail is quite specific. The detail is pretty naturalistic as well. But that being said, the naturalism is also, though, mixed in with some contradictions of naturalism, meaning like he is showing an apple tree, and this is getting super nitpicky, but the apple tree has fig leaves. So that doesn't quite make sense naturalistically in what you'd find in nature. There's a parrot in a German forest. Well, parrots aren't naturally found in a German forest, but supposedly they were like items of interest to the Germans. So there's a parrot there, and he is standing or sitting on top of that branch. And the artist's name is there, saying where in Germany he is from, but it's written in Latin. And then Adam and Eve, of course, being in a German forest. So despite all the naturalistic detail, the beautiful lines of the hair and the naturalistic muscles and the attention to detail on the animals and so on, there's still some contradictions of naturalism that you find in the image. Now on the left-hand side here, I just wanted to give you a close-up of the mouse that's in the image, because Adam, who is in the image here, is considered to be the first son of God. He is the first individual, this man that God creates. And Christ is sometimes thought of as the second Adam. And it's interesting here that Adam is standing on top of the mouse's tail. In this way, Adam has become a mousetrap. And if you remember the Annunciation triptych, where Joseph is in that image making mousetraps, that Christ becomes the mousetrap. He is the one to ensnare and entrap evil. You have in this symbolism here with the mouse and Adam's foot, that kind of foreshadowing of the second Adam, or Christ, who has to be born into this world because of the sin of Adam and Eve. Now, again, on the right-hand side, we got our cute little parrot again. And part of the reason why the parrot is there is as a symbol of salvation, a counterbalance to the present of the serpent and the evil temptation of Satan. And it all kind of harkens back to the call or the sound parrots make, which I'm not going to make, but I wrote it up on the screen. And so it almost sounds like Ave Maria or Hail Mary. So people thought the sound a parrot made sounded similar to the Ave Maria, and kind of then linked the two things together. So the parrot here becomes that symbol of salvation, hope, the Virgin Mary, and so on. So that's also why the parrot is there. It kind of goes beyond just the fascination that Germans had with parrots. So that is, I believe, to be your content in the scene. The only other thing I wanted to show you was one of the Greek sculptures that influenced the creation of the bodies here, especially the body of Adam. It's a classical Greek sculpture named the Apollo Belvedere. And so I just wanted you to have that visual. And the images, the similarities are there. This could be one that Albrecht Dürer looked at and was inspired by as he created this engraving of Adam and Eve. And then the only other thing to look at, and just out of visual interest, and perhaps this could be an attribution, and just to get you a little bit more informed about Dürer. One on the right is another engraving he did called The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. and it's just a phenomenal engraving that I thought you could see. And on the left-hand side, just so that you could get a sense, besides the self-portrait on the first slide, of another painting that he has done with looking at the apostles, the four apostles. And Dewar was a Protestant. He is more Protestant leaning, so the painting on the left is focusing on the Word. And we will be talking about how the Protestants focus more on the Word of God and the Bible versus some of the other things that you focus on in Catholicism. So again, that is the new technique and the really spectacular kind of detail and storytelling of Albrecht Dürer. And again, the vocabulary terms that you want to know are engraving and then humors, as in the four humors. I would say for function here, you definitely have religion, religious piece here with Adam and Eve. It is a narrative, storytelling piece for sure. And then for formal qualities, you could do form, where the form of the figures are very three-dimensional and classically inspired. I think that would be pretty sufficient. And I hope you enjoyed Albrecht Dürer's Adam and Eve.